Come back to that a little bit later on. Johann Zarco, from pole to podium, was actually the first man to not win or not take victory from pole in Portimao. I have to admit, Simon, that coming into this year, I wondered whether Johann would be able to keep his seat in Pramac with all of the hungry, young, talented Ducati riders that we've got. Paolo Campinotti, on the run-up to that race, pretty much stood by his rider, stood by his man, and said, we will do everything we can to keep Johann. But I think what we saw there, 2 podiums in 5 races, you can't argue with that, can you?
No, and I mean, there's probably a little bit of politics helping Johann, you know, stay in the championship, meaning country he comes from. I'm only guessing there, but I imagine there's a bit of politics. But Johann fully deserves, he's proved it again, that he deserves the seat. And it really makes me smile when he does well and beats a bunch of the young fellas, because I love his honesty. Like I mentioned it after the flag last time, he just comes out and says what he really believes, and he's not afraid to, what's the word, basically heap praise on his opposition when they do something he thinks is really impressive, and I love seeing that. I like that he doesn't care. He just says what he's got to the age, I think, he just says what he genuinely believes. And man, can he ride it. When things come together for Johann, he's stubborn, like all good racers are, and I'm genuinely pleased for him.
We'll move on to our final man in Portugal, Aleix Espargaro. Pretty much that podium was sealed by the fact we saw the Miller and Mir incident, where Jack Miller unfortunately went down, lost the front end and took Mir with him. But he looked as though he was coming back into it, didn't he? Yes,
and I mean, again, like I mentioned on After the Flag, after the race, Aleix and the Aprilia are good everywhere. Now, America was their bogey track, one of the worst of the season for them. It was the worst last year. I think 5 crashes and 1 out of the race. And they went back there and finished not too far behind, you know, distance-wise and time behind the leaders. And even though the position wasn't awesome, and now they've turned up at a track that wasn't a bad one for them and on the podium. And like you were saying, yes, it was helped by 2 fallers, but he came right back to challenge Johann Zarco for second.
Yeah.
So the Aprilia and Aleix, I think, are competitive everywhere. It's really impressive.
Well, they are now 1 podium away from losing their concessions.
Good
How
point.
is that going to affect them, do you think?
Well, Aleix is happy to, because he wants to fight on even terms, and he believes that they can. I've actually asked some Aprilia guys and who will know, and they said that they've been working towards this for the last couple of years, meaning, yeah, they have the concessions, but they're trying to do the mileage on their engines to prove to themselves that they are ready for the step. Because you can imagine, once you suddenly get the concessions taken away, if you are forced all of a sudden to do something you're not used to, meaning do bigger mileage on the engine, you have to turn the power down to that, it's going to be a bigger transition going into next year with only 7 engines, not 9. So I believe they're ready, you know. Yeah. Yes, it might affect their performance a little, but I think they're ready to make the step.
Let's move on to the man that we mentioned at the top of the show, Alex Rins, 23rd to 4th. You and I spoke here in the preview last week about the fact, or well, questioning whether he had that consistency, and that completely answered it. I'm so enjoying having Alex Rins back.
I've thought about that because it was such an impressive first lap. You know, he's like, I know you're a fan of his style as well.
Yeah,
He's
I love
beautiful rider, always been fast. He's a big natural ability rider. But one thing I thought about watching this start is he's been fighting from a bad position for years, because the Suzuki wasn't good at qualifying, you know.
Yeah.
And both riders, he's been doing this for the last few years.
Great point.
Fighting through. He's also a very clean rider. When he makes overtakes, he does them with really good judgment, like, again, like a natural feel for things, you know. And I'd go as far as saying, when you think about it, I don't have the stats like in rugby or something about meters forward or gain, you know, but he must be one of the riders that has overtaken the most riders in the whole championship. If you look at those past years, how way he's come through from the grid. So I think he's had practice at it, he's good at it, and he showed how good last Sunday. It was amazing.
You could almost say the same about Joan Mir, talking about riders that are used to coming through. But of course, last weekend, Joan Mir actually did start from the front row. He then obviously was caught up with Jack Miller's crash. But then speaking to him on Sunday evening in the TV set, he was a lot more disappointed than I expected. Not because of Jack Miller, but in actual fact, because he said to me, there were 7 laps to go. I was never going to finish on the podium, which took me by surprise. But I know that you've actually got some really good insight.
Well, he was going backwards, wasn't he? And I was shocked, I was genuinely surprised, because I'd put my, not literal money, but my bet on him for the race win. Yes, Fabio was amazing, and we'll never know if Joan could have beaten Fabio, but I genuinely believe if Joan didn't have a technical problem in the race, that Joan would have been fighting Fabio. He would have put up a good fight with Fabio in the race. Who knows who would have come out on top, but he was going backwards because of this technical problem, and what a shame, because he was going backwards. He fell into the grasp of others and got in the position where Jack had to look. They're both, like I said during the commentary, they're both the hardest braking riders on the calendar. And when you watch one of those guys being overtaken by someone, even if it's each other, you know that the limit is really high. And that's what happens, The other thing is Jack is on the inside of Joan, so he's off the ideal line, which has the most amount of rubber, most amount of grip, and is not as clean. And when you're right on the limit, that's what happens.
Well, Joan actually described the race as his worst session of the weekend, someone that definitely wouldn't have the same kind of thought in his back pocket. Did you want to add something?
Well, only because Joan was so disappointed, I believe, because he didn't get to show what he really could do. When a lost opportunity hurts a lot. Jack, good boy, going and
it was nice to see them patch things up. They obviously had their moments in the past, but good to see that seems to have kind of smoothed itself over. Back to what I was about to bring up next. So we mentioned the fact there were great rides throughout the field. One of them, Pecco Bagnaia. We had some big crashes in Portimao. Unfortunately, Pecco was one of them. He went into the race back of the grid. He came all the way through to the top 8 based on 20 minutes dry track time in warm-up. I actually asked him, you can't do a ride like that if you're not feeling good with your bike. And you saw he was a bit hesitant. He didn't want to commit to it, but essentially saying, I think we're back.
I go along with that because he was injured. His right shoulder did not have the same power. He couldn't use it, He said he had to compensate using his left more and grabbing the bike with his knees more to better. He didn't look as comfortable on the bike, but that's what caused it.
Still makes you go ouch now, doesn't it? We've seen it so many times. Not great for Pecco at all.
Must have been close to dislocating or something. He injured his shoulder anyway, and because of this he had to ride the bike a little differently, but Obvious had an amazing feel, because otherwise you couldn't work your way through everyone and get up to, what was it, 8th? You said
8th in the end.
Really impressive, injured. So when he says he's kind of basically saying he's back, I think he's got a really good feeling with that front end again, and believes he can ride it like he did at the end of last year.
But Simon, how does that come from a weekend in Portimao where we had, like we said, 20 minutes ride track time and warm-up?
Yeah, but he found it at previous ones, you know. It was a little bit shaky until Argentina, but Argentina, then America, he started getting this feeling back, and from what he's saying, he sounds like it is back. So fingers crossed for him, because he's very good here, you know, past years. Yeah. Almost won it one year, then super fast the next. So
there's one more rider I really wanted to give a shout out to, and that was Aleix Marquez, because he's had some tough times recently, and I just thought he was really consistent across the weekend. It didn't matter what the conditions were. He qualified well, and I think that just shows, put Aleix in a better qualifying position and look what he can do in a race. I think he came home in 7th in the end.
I don't want to be pessimistic, but I mean, I think he's very good at that track. There's going to be a couple of tracks where he shines more, you know, and he was, like you said, he was fast, really impressive fast in dodgy conditions and fast all weekend. So, I mean, I hope that it's the start of, you know what I mean, some better results for him, because he needs some, you know, and he's a super nice fellow. Like all of us that have to deal with him and debrief, so he's lovely, you know.
So nice.
Absolute gent. But I don't think so. I think all the Honda guys were struggling at Portimao and all struggling, not all of them would say it, but reading between the lines, some more obvious than others, all saying struggling with rear grip, and some of them saying struggling with turning, and that is causing the rear grip problem, because you arrive to the exit area where you have to open the throttle and you still have to be leaned over because the bike hasn't finished turning.
Yeah.
So they haven't worked it out, figured it all out. I believe they're going to do. I'm going to be keeping an eye on FP1 and FP3 on bike setup, because I believe they're going to throw everything they can to try and get the bike set up good for Jerez, and then I believe we're going to see some new chassis and things on Monday at the test here.
We were just getting some images there of the really entertaining battle between Aleix and Marc Marquez. Yeah. And I remember going to Marc on Sunday and thinking he was going to be pretty happy with P6. I mean, in terms of a result, it's not bad. He was so disappointed with the distance from the race winner and said, we've got to improve. And I said, well, where? In the front end, is it? And he's like, no, I don't want to be specific. We've got to improve everywhere. And I think what you've just summarised there perfectly explains what it is he was referencing.
Marc's never going to be happy unless he's fighting for at least podium positions on the bad days. He wants to win on the good days, you know, and Portimao was neither of them. So he wants to fight for the championship, and you can't do that finishing sixth, you know, and not being able to fight. One other thing Marc said was some of the other Honda riders said this bike is great and a really good rear grip, and he said in his debrief, but I warned that in testing, in winter testing, when everyone was happy with it, testing, the track has a lot of rubber down. Yeah. And he didn't say anything more. And that's basically saying, yeah, the rear grip was there when the rubber was down, but when you've got a green track going into Portimao with hardly any dry time on it, we didn't have any rear grip. So that's what I read between the lines.
Well, coming on now to here in Jerez, 3 previous winners amongst the field, Marc being one of them, Fabio Quartararo, and also Jack Miller last year when Fabio suffered the arm pump injuries. Now, I think a lot of people will think that Fabio is going to be the favourite coming into this weekend off the back of a win. He's obviously got some pretty good track record here around the Jerez circuit. But, Si, I think you've got to put Alex Rins up there.
I totally agree with you. I think Fabio is the favourite. I agree. He'll be riding the crest of a wave. He really is riding it. And the other big push for Fabio is he knows it's one of the few that him and the Yamaha can take it to everyone, you know, and do what he did in Portimao. I really think it's an opportunity that Fabio can't afford to miss, you know. But this is MotoGP. Anything can happen. So, yes, Alex Rins on the form he's on and previous form at this circuit. Aleix thinks he's up for it here, a podium. Marc, I believe Marc has got a point to prove here. He wants to do something here. You know how good he was a couple of years ago when he hurt himself. It was amazing. I think he can force an awesome result here. And then there's the 2 Ducatis of Miller and Bagnaia, who have done amazing here before, like race-winning pace. So then there's, excuse me, I've got to throw it in, but there's the 2, Bastianini and Martin, that are a little bit special, you know, they can do something. So there's so many that could do something, and I think, like, Joan Mir is going to be, if no more technical problems, he's going to be getting some points for the championship again. Good one. So that's my rough take on it for this weekend.
I'm hoping to see Jorge Martin back up there because he's had a few unlucky races so far this season. And when I spoke to him on Sunday, I thought he would kind of be a little bit down and out, that things hadn't really gone his way. He didn't look comfortable, I thought, across the weekend. But he really backs himself. He's like, I know I'm one of the fastest and the top riders. And I smiled. And he's like, why are you smiling? I was like, because why would you be here if you don't back yourself.
Yeah.
So it's like...
He is something special,
Yeah.
and that's why I had to mention him and Bastianini, because they're the next generation, of superstars in the sport. So when they're having a good day, meaning everything's come together setup-wise, which obviously didn't happen with Jorge, like the 20 minutes only dry time before the race,
Ridiculous.
And you're going to see the less experienced guys struggle a bit more. So here, I doubt we're going to have that, so I think they'll be there.
And of course, coming up on Monday, Simon, we have got the all-important Jerez test. There is not one manufacturer that can afford to rest on their laurels this year. The competition is so equal, it's so high. Do you think we're going to see a lot of manufacturers throwing new bits at it? You mentioned a couple of the things we think we're going to see for Honda.
Yes, I think you did right. It's the first opportunity after the away races. So there's been a good amount of weeks where the factory can get direction but also get some parts made to help, with that direction. I think we're going to see the first of them here, and always we see them here, and then especially at after Misano test. They're the two to keep an eye out. Here will be less, but a few things, and then Misano, because you've had quite a few months, you see the big injection of new parts turn up. One more thing to mention is I like keeping an eye on the rookies, and Remy was the impressive rookie at the end result-wise in the last weekend. Looking forward to see who's the impressive rookie this weekend.
Thank you so much, Simon. As always, an absolute pleasure to chew the fat with you ahead of a weekend's worth of action. Just to let you know, we've got some exciting things coming up this weekend. Obviously, we've got Moto E with their first race. Actually, they've got a double header, so 2 races to keep an eye out for, the first of which will be on Friday. And then join us Saturday evening as Jorge Lorenzo is inducted into MotoGP's Hall of Fame. So it's all going on here in Jerez. But up first, we've got Matt Burr and our Thursday press conference.